Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're located. My name is Karen Righthand. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Marketing here at SCS Global Services, and I'll be your host today. On behalf of everyone here at SCS Global Services, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. We will be hearing from Nicole Munoz, our Vice President of Environmental Certification Services, and Youssra Elkhatib, presenter. She is the program manager for our circular materials division. Before I introduce our speakers and our topic, I would like to just take a moment to let you know that you're on GoToWebinar and our listeners are in listen-only mode. But to avoid any unnecessary background noise, you're all muted, and this will remain a one-way presentation for the duration of the event. But if you would like to ask a question, I encourage you to do so, and please just go to the question section in your control panel and type in your question and hit send, and we'll be collecting them throughout the webinar. So when you think of a question, be sure to ask it, and there's no need to wait until the very end, but we will be taking the questions at the end. And depending on the amount of time that we have left, we'll make every effort to answer all of your questions, and if there are a few that we can't get to, we can follow up with you separately. Today's presentation is being recorded, and for some reason that recording started before we were at the 10 o'clock hour, so we'll edit that out, but we will be emailing out the recording after the webinar. And now I'd like to just say a few words about SCS Global Services for any of you who are unfamiliar with our company. We have been around for, this year, 40 years. We've done over 30,000 certifications in 125 countries around the globe. We've got well upwards of 15,000 clients, and we have auditors in every major market. This is our institutional network. So SCS Global Services, we are the certification, verification, and auditing body, but also under the SCS umbrella, we have a standards development organization, a freestanding and independent consulting services division, and we've just launched a very exciting initiative to slow global warming with full climate accounting called the Global Heat Reduction Initiative. We basically do reach virtually every sector of the economy with one certification or another. We have upward of 140 different certifications that we provide to our clients, so we have expertise in pretty much every industry that's out there. And we are located all over the world, so we have auditors, and these aren't all offices, but we have auditors based all around the world, and we have definitely global coverage. So with that, I would like to introduce Nicole, who will kick us off.
Thank you, Karen, and thanks everyone for joining today and learning a little bit more about the SCS Recycled Content Standard version 8 that was just released last month, and the benefits of certification for this updated standard. So a little bit of background about the history of the SCS Recycled Content Standard. It is SCS's anchor certification and standard of the SCS portfolio of certificates. It is one of SCS's first eco-label developed in 1989, and the standard is now referenced as SCS-103 Certification Standard for recycled content, and it was published by our SCS Standards Group, a non-profit affiliate of SCS, and it was the facilitator for the public review process and ensured that we went through a multi-stakeholder process. So how to get certified? So I would start with requesting that you download this standard from the SCS Standards website and evaluate the certification pathway options right for your products and for your production processes. Right now, the certification requires a minimum of 5% recycled content in order to make a recycled content claim in compliance with the standard. The threshold of 5% was set because this is a standard that covers all industry sectors. And the intent of the standard is to continuously increase the minimum threshold for the recycled content and setting the bar and continuously setting the bar higher to improve recycled content use in products. Now, who is the standard applicable to? It is applicable for material recyclers to final manufacturing and also including brands and OEMs. Certification can be used for B2B and B2C claims and support supply chain certification requirements, green building requirements, brand and retailer certification specifications or requirements in order to enter their vendor system. I will now introduce you to my colleague, Youssra Elkhatib, Program Manager for Circular Materials, and we'll be going over and reviewing the details of the version 8 updates and benefits.
Hi, everyone. So the recycled content standard is actually applicable to all the industries. So if you're manufacturing an intermediate product or a final product, if it contains recycled material, then you can apply for recycled content, the recycled content certification. So this includes the textile industry, electronics, intermediate products such as pellets or resin, building construction materials, and packaging materials. So what has really changed between version 7 and version 8? So what we've changed is that we've added more features that we see in the recycling industry today. So we've added the chain of custody models. So in version 7, we recognized physical segregation, controlled blending, and mass balance. In version 8, we're also recognizing mass balance allocation, whilst also recognizing the chemical recycling process and setting out requirements of how you will be assessed under the standard. And finally, we're recognizing other standards that have a recycled content claim, such as ISCC, Red Cert, the Textile Exchange, and the FSC standards. Next slide. So, what is mechanical recycling, which was under the recycled content standard of version 7? So, version 7 only saw mechanical recycling, which is a process that processes waste into a secondary material by retaining its molecular structure. These processes include sorting, washing, drying, regranulating, compounding, and reprocessing. Whilst chemical recycling can deal with more complex streams that are made of polymers. These are broken down into new chemicals and into monomers, such as recycling processes like depolymerization and gasification. So with these complex streams, they are usually unsuitable for mechanical recycling and would have otherwise resulted in incineration or a landfill. Next slide. So the next thing is the chain of custody models. So in version 7, we only saw physical segregation and controlled blending, which is a model that you're able to identify the origin of the recycled content, and they're kept physically separate during operations. So when a client is trying to implement a physical segregation or controlled blending model, they'd have to meet the minimum requirement of at least 5% recycled content. They have to have a documented procedure and be able to clearly identify the recycled material in the final product. Usually with controlled blending, they can be mixed with the virgin materials, but the final recycled content by weight is known in the final product. And keep record of scrap, waste, material supply, production data, and recycled material inventories. And finally, the material input and output reconciliation, which is the total mass of your recycled output over the total mass of the input. Next slide. Whilst in mass balance allocation, this is certifying a material or product that is entering the supply chain with an allocated recycled content claim, which is based on a credit accounting process. So if to implement this, the mass balance allocation model, and this is set out in the Virgin 8 standard, the final allocated product should meet at least 5% of allocated recycled content, while also defining your geographical and a defined system boundary. This includes if you're having multiple sites, are they, for example, physically connected, like with pipelines, where the sites are located, what is the system boundary for the transformation process, and keeping track of your material inflow, of your material flow, your input, and your final recycled content credit when leaving the system, which is your output. This can be determined with your convergent factor, which is your total mass output over your total mass inputs. So the mass balance credit accounting system is tracked using only 2 units, either by mass, for example, grams of material inputs transformed into grams of material output, or with chemical recycling using the energetic value, which is equal to the lower heating value of the material. This is usually based on the published reference values or the documented material testing. And finally, for mass balance allocation, a client has to demonstrate reconciliation for a minimum of every 3 months. So at the end of the reconciliation period, your recycled content credit should be 0 or positive. And it's important to note here that your recycled content credit does not expire. Furthermore, it's important that if a client is certified with SCS with mass balance allocation, that is usually reflected on the logo on the SCS recycled content logo, and it clearly says that it's mass balance allocation. Next slide, please. So how can you get certified with SCS? First, you can submit an application. Afterwards, you'd be a member of the SCS team will reach out to you and help to scope a product, to scope your project. This usually takes around 8 to 10 weeks for the whole process, and it usually depends on how many sites you have, how many products that you're trying to get certified with SCS. Afterwards, you'd be introduced to your operations team, which is made up of an auditor and an account manager, and after you submit your data, the auditor will conduct a mass balance assessment against the standard and issue findings, recommendations, and an audit report, and in the end make the final certification decision. So what documents and what are the assessment requirements? So the assessment requirements is to have at least a minimum of 12 months of data, which is your data review period. If you have less, this is something that you can discuss with SCS. You have to have prepared your bill of materials, and your bill of materials, your total production during the data review period, total purchasing and inventory records, your site procedures, such as your supplier approval process, your formulation controls, what is your manufacturing processes, manufacturing procedure, and material supply confirmation. This is usually via invoices or affidavits or KYC documentation. An on-site audit on the site or a supplier site is determined on a risk-based approach. And at the end of the process, you will receive a full audit report, and at the successful completion of the assessment, you would also receive a recycled content certificate for your product. So what is the benefits of the SCS recycled content certificate? So the assessment actually allows it's validating an accuracy of percentage of recycled content claim in the marketplace. So this is a certificate that is third-party certified, not just first-party. It also supports transparency in the product claim in the consumer market, in the consumer and the marketplace. And it helps reduce the reliance of virgin materials and promote more recycled materials and products. And finally, by getting certified with SCS, and using recycled material, you are reducing the amount of waste that ends up in a landfill. And thank you, everyone. Now we'll open for some questions.
Thank you, Youssra. Thank you, Nicole. Yes, and please feel free to continue typing in questions if you have them. One question that we have is the choice of chain of custody depend on the industry or the material that's being recycled, or can the applicant choose which chain of custody to apply by themselves?
I can answer
Youssra?
that. Yeah. So the applicant can choose which chain of custody they are using on site. So you can be a mechanical recycler who chooses to conduct mass balance allocation, as long as you meet the requirements set out in the standard with the boundaries and system boundaries, and you can demonstrate the recycled content by weight or by the credit system. You can choose the chain of custody model you would like to apply for.
Great, great. Here's another one. How is this different than GRS or RCS? Nicole, you want to take that one? Or Youssra?
Sorry. Yes, so the difference would be for the GRS or RCS is that the SCS Recycle Content Standard does not require transaction certificates. And also differences would be inclusive of licensing fees as well, is differences there. In regards to the calculations and things like that, we are including similar methodologies on that side. For the recycled content, we also are including the chemical recycling portion of that as well. So those are large, broad differences of between the textile exchange RCS and GRS and SCS recycled content.
Great. And here's one. Are there social and environmental impacts throughout the chain of custody as part of the certification, or only chain of custody?
The focus is a single attribute claim. So we are focusing on the chain of custody and the material claims within the product. We are not evaluating social or environmental criteria in this certification.
Right. Okay. What rules do version 8 apply to fuels produced through chemical recycling in determining what is a fuel versus what is a chemical that generates recycled content credits? Not sure if I understand that question. Youssra, is that?
So the recycled content the version 8 doesn't recognize fuel using waste as a recycled content credit. So that would just be identified as waste. In this case, we're not seeing fuel as recycled content made from waste materials.
Great. If you do, okay.
This is just to remain in line with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the US Plastics Pact.
If you do controlled blending, can you average using mass balance to ensure that you can flatten supply chain issues should they arise?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sure. If you do controlled blending, can you average using mass balance to ensure you can flatten the supply chain issues should they arise?
So we do offer an average claim with the SCS Recycled Content Certificate. So if you're seeing in your production where your final product recycled content claim is varying between sites, so across like 2% or so, then we do offer like an average claim for your recycled content for controlled blending models. Yes.
Wonderful. Here's one. What types of feedstocks are accepted? Biocircular, CCU, etc., or just recycled waste?
So the feedstock that accepted is if it's defined under a post-consumer material or pre-consumer material. So once it's post-consumer, pre-consumer, post-consumer being used by the end user, consumed, pre-consumer is, for example, items that might be scrapped or rejected from the manufacturing line, and that is reprocessed. So once it's defined as one of those two, it can be accepted as recycled material once it's been reprocessed.
Great. Let's see here. Here's an interesting one. If a facility is already certified with GRS or RCS, is there any audit advantage? And, you know, what is the interoperability between those certifications? I mean, we do have customers that we do multiple certifications for. I don't know, maybe Nicole, do you want to address that?
Sure. Yes, we do cross-recognize certifications, including textile exchange. And with that, if you are already certified with RCS or GRS, we would obviously would like your certs, your scope certificate, and last audit report to evaluate if there are any conformities that need to be addressed. But otherwise, it would be recognized and would greatly reduce the audit time. We likely, unless there's any issues on the audit report stating otherwise, we would not require an on-site audit. We would just ensure that you have the same sources and nothing has changed in your scope certificate, and honor that and be able to also include that under the SCS Recycle Content claim.
Here's another one. Does version 8 place limits on geographic boundaries? For instance, could a credit be transferred across country borders, like a China recycler generating a credit to sending credit to a US manufacturer?
So the credits can be transferred as long as can be transferred between sites as long as they're wholly or majority owned by the client.
Great. And Youssra, can you elaborate on the differences between mass balance and mass balance allocation?
Sure. So with mass balance, this is when, for example, you're undergoing a process and you have a yield that's like 95%. So you're allocating to the same product. While mass balance allocation, you can allocate to a different product your recycled credit.
Great. Well, here's a good question. If a company's current recycled content certification through SCS was conducted under version 7, is a change to version 8 mandatory, or can the company continue to use the same chain of custody, physical segregation, and recycling process, mechanical recycling, that has been used previously?
So if a client is currently certified with version 7, they can continue to use the same chain of custody model. The requirements have not changed. There is no changes in the requirements from version 7 and version 8. Instead, version 8 adds another chain of custody model and accepts chemical recycling.
Great. Once the generator of the waste is certified under version 8, what is required by other companies down the supply chain that want to also use SCS's version 8 certification? That's a really good question. Youssra, you want to take that, or Nicole?
Sure. Yes. So the SCS Recycle Content Certification would certify the product. So if a client, for example, the intermediate recycled product is certified, if that is used in a final product, such as like a packaging material, and that client and this brand or retail is trying to make a claim on this, they would also require the recycled content certification. If they're forming it or adding a level of processing or manufacturing in any way. If the product is sourced from a mass balance allocation model, that is also reflected on the certificate on the final product, for the final product. So if you're using pellets that are mass balance allocated and you're forming a box, a plastic box, your certificate could be detailing that your product, your box, your final product, and detailing that it's sourced from a mass balance allocated, that the plastic is sourced is mass balance.
Perfect. Then we have someone asking about, you know, pending legislation in Europe, you know, just whether or not our standard will be robust against those kinds of legislation. I don't know if Nicole, you want to address that?
Sure. So right now, as folks on the call probably know, there's lots of different changes or new regions or countries adding requirements of recycled content. So we are diligently in the process of making sure that we are staying on top of the requirements and working to, if we need to, adjust the requirements to meet those. In some cases, there are regions that require accreditation. So we are also in the process of working through that. If you have a specific question or country request, you can send that into the team, myself or Youssra, and we can direct you if we are making progress or what the timeline is for some of those acceptances. But yeah, there's multiple, I guess, paths that we're taking to keep on top of these, depending on what the requirements are across the globe.
Wonderful. That's great. And I will add, we have a whole team at SCS Global Services that does nothing but focus on these accreditations and certifications and whatnot like that. So we've come to the end of our time. We've answered the questions. So I want to thank everyone for attending. Again, we will be sending out a recording shortly, and we stand ready to take your questions and look forward to hearing from you if you should need any help. Thank you so much for attending today. On behalf of the presenters and myself, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.